Have you ever noticed that the people who really see you aren't looking at what you're showing them? They're looking at what you're not showing them. Welcome back to Wired Logic HQ, where we decode the hidden mechanics of human behavior. I'm your host, and today we're exploring a phenomenon that most people experience but few understand: why the human brain is obsessed with what you're hiding. This isn't about being manipulative or dishonest. It's about something far more interesting: a fundamental mismatch between the persona we present to the world and the person we actually are. And there are people out there whose brains are literally wired to detect that gap. Let's dive in. Let's start with something you already know, but probably haven't thought about deeply. Everyone has a mask. When you wake up and check your phone, you're not the same person you were 5 minutes later when someone texts you. When you walk into a workplace, your vocal tone shifts, your posture adjusts, your word choice becomes more measured. This isn't pathological, it's normal. We all do this because society requires it. But here's what's fascinating. Most people accept these masks at face value. They see their colleagues smiling in the meeting and think, okay, they're happy. They see their friend posting vacation photos and think, they're living their best life. They hear someone say, I'm fine, and they take it as information rather than a placeholder. These are the people who are, metaphorically speaking, playing checkers. They're taking the visible move at face value and moving on. But approximately 20% of the population, people with what psychologists call high perceptual sensitivity, are playing chess. Their brains don't accept the surface information. Instead, they're running constant background analysis. They're watching the microexpressions. They're tracking the slight tightness in your jaw when you said you were excited about something. They're noticing that you laughed, but your eyes didn't crinkle at the corners the way they do when you genuinely laugh. These are the human lie detectors. What makes this neurologically interesting is that these people aren't paranoid. They're not trying to catch you in deception. Their brains simply can't turn off the analysis. It's like asking someone with perfect pitch to listen to music and ignore whether a note is slightly sharp. It's not a choice. Their perceptual system is literally designed to prioritize the incongruence between what's being said and what's actually happening. And here's the psychological twist. This makes them utterly fascinated by hidden things. Why? Because hidden information is real information. It's the only data point that hasn't been filtered through social performance. When someone's mask slips, even for a microsecond, that brief flash of authentic emotion is like striking gold for an observant mind. It's information that bypasses all the filtering and gets straight to the truth. To understand why the brain becomes obsessed with hidden things, we need to talk about something called information prioritization. Your brain is essentially a prediction machine. Every second, it's processing millions of data points and deciding which ones matter. The brain has limited processing power, so it's ruthlessly efficient. It ignores most things and amplifies whatever seems most important for survival and connection. Now think about the information hierarchy. What does the brain consider important? First, it looks for survival threats, things that might hurt you. Second, it looks for social threats or opportunities, things that affect your belonging and status. Third, it looks for novel or surprising information, things that don't fit the pattern it expected. Here, where hidden things become neurologically fascinating, the gap between the mask and the person underneath is inherently surprising. It violates the expected pattern. When you say you're fine but your voice cracks slightly, that violation of expectation triggers your brain's surprise circuits. And surprise demands attention. It demands analysis. But there's something deeper happening too. The brain recognizes on some level that semantically empty information is not worth processing. When someone engages in pure social performance, the elevator small talk, the scripted responses, the automatic "you're so awesome" comments, the brain registers this as low-value data. It's predictable. It's noise. It's information that tells you almost nothing about the person you're actually interacting with. But the hidden parts, the things people are trying not to reveal, those are high-value data. They're authentic. They're specific to this person in this moment. They can't be faked because they occur involuntarily. They're what researchers in deception detection call the leakage cues, the subtle expressions and behaviors that reveal what someone is actually feeling beneath their conscious control. Imagine you're watching someone receive compliments. Their words say, "Thank you, I'm so grateful." But their breathing quickens slightly. Their fingers press into their palms. There's a microsecond where their expression shows something closer to anxiety than joy. Most people see gratitude. They check that box and move on. But the perceptually sensitive person sees, what is this person actually anxious about? Why aren't they comfortable with praise? What are they hiding about their self-perception? And suddenly, that person becomes interesting. Not in a creepy way, but in the way a mystery is interesting. The brain wants to solve it. It wants to access the truth beneath the performance. This is actually an evolutionary advantage. Throughout human history, the people who could read what others were really feeling, beneath their social performance, had a better chance of detecting who was trustworthy, who was dangerous, and who was secretly interested in them romantically. These were survival skills. What's interesting is that this skill is exhausting for the people who have it. People with high perceptual sensitivity often describe feeling drained by social interaction because they're processing so much more data than everyone else. They can't just hear words. They have to process microexpressions. They can't just accept "I'm fine." They have to reconcile that against the tension they see in the shoulders. They're essentially running advanced analytics on every social interaction, which is cognitively expensive. And this is why people who see through masks become obsessed with authenticity. They're tired of chewing on cardboard. They want to interact with people who are actually present, actually honest, actually real. Because that requires less processing power. Paradoxically, the most perceptive people often crave simplicity and truth above all else. Let's talk about something called mirror neurons, because this is where the psychology gets really interesting. Mirror neurons are a system in your brain that activates both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing that action. They're the neurological basis for empathy. They're why watching someone yawn makes you yawn. They're why seeing someone in pain creates an empathetic response in your brain. But here what researchers have discovered. Some people have what we might call mirror neurons on steroids. Their mirror neuron systems are exceptionally active and sensitive. They don't just observe emotions, they absorb them. If you've ever been around someone who could read the room instantly, who could walk into a tense situation and immediately sense the problem without anyone telling them, that's likely someone with a highly active mirror neuron system. These people don't just see your public persona, they feel what you're suppressing. If you're anxious but trying to hide it, they sense the anxiety. If you're sad but performing happiness, they feel the sadness underneath. If you're insecure but projecting confidence, they sense the insecurity. And this creates an interesting psychological dynamic. They often feel that you're lying to them by presenting the mask. Not because they think you're consciously deceptive, but because the authentic emotional state they're sensing is different from the performance they're watching. This is why people who have experienced significant trauma or challenge often develop these heightened sensitivities. Trauma survivors frequently develop exceptional ability to read others because, in their past, survival literally depended on noticing the subtle signs that something was wrong. Their brain learned that the official story, "everything is fine," couldn't be trusted. Only the physical, emotional, and behavioral cues could be trusted. So when these people interact with someone performing social niceties, there's a part of their brain that automatically translates that performance back to its emotional reality. They're not trying to do this. It's automatic. It's like they have X-ray vision for emotional dishonesty. And this creates a fascinating psychological dynamic. People with this ability often attract others who are secretly desperate to be truly seen. Because most of us are walking around feeling invisible in our authenticity. We show the world our polished version, and people validate the polished version, and we end up feeling profoundly alone, because nobody knows the real us. But then you meet someone who sees you, someone who notices when you're not okay, even when you're saying you are, someone who doesn't require you to perform, and it feels like a miracle. This is why sensitive people often become confidants, therapists, coaches, or healers, sometimes even when that's not what they intended to do with their lives. People are drawn to them because being around them is the closest most of us get to being truly seen. Now let's flip this on its head, because there's another side to this psychology that's equally important: the power that comes from choosing to keep things private. In a performance economy, which is what modern life increasingly is, there's something profoundly attractive about someone who doesn't perform, someone who doesn't need to post their accomplishments, someone who doesn't perform emotions for social validation, someone who is secure enough in themselves that they don't feel compelled to prove anything to anyone. Psychologically, this creates something called the mystery premium. People are more attracted to what they can't fully access. This isn't shallow, it's actually deeply rooted in how our brains work. When we have complete information about someone, our brains can relax. We've solved the puzzle. We can predict their behavior. Boring, predictable, no longer interesting. But when someone keeps parts of themselves private, not in a deceptive way but in a bounded, healthy way, our brains treat that as a puzzle to solve. There's cognitive arousal. There's intrigue. There's something worth investigating. This is why the most charismatic, attractive people often aren't the ones who share everything. They're the ones who are clearly themselves but remain somewhat unknowable. They're the ones who smile mysteriously. They're the ones who don't over-explain or overshare. They're the ones who are comfortable with silence. And here's something important. This isn't manipulation. This is actually a form of self-respect and power. When you understand that your full self doesn't need to be on display for validation, when you understand that some of your depths should remain private and personal, you're actually operating from a place of security. You don't need everyone to understand you. You don't need everyone to approve of you. You're complete as you are. This kind of person is fascinating to observant people because, paradoxically, they're easier to read. Not because they reveal more, but because they're not performing. There's no mask. There's just a person who is selective about what they share, secure in themselves, and unconcerned with the gap between public and private because they're not performing either version. Sensitive people find this refreshing. It's like being able to talk to someone without the constant background noise of analysis. The person isn't hiding things defensively. They're simply maintaining privacy as a healthy boundary. This distinction is crucial. There's a difference between secrecy and privacy. Secrecy implies shame or deception. Privacy is just the natural boundary of the self. And the brain understands this difference. We trust people more when they seem to have healthy privacy boundaries, because it suggests they have nothing to hide, even if they're not showing everything. The absence of defensive performance is more trustworthy than complete transparency. Here's something that psychologists and philosophers have known for centuries, but most of us don't really practice. The most profound insights are found in silence, not in noise. Think about the moments when you've had the deepest understanding about yourself or someone else. Were you in a crowded room? Were you listening to someone perform and perform and perform? Or were you in a quiet moment, maybe with someone you trust, when the performance finally stopped and something real was allowed to exist? The reason hidden traits create deep intrigue is that people recognize intuitively that silence isn't empty, it's where clarity lives. In our current culture, we're obsessed with content. We're obsessed with sharing. We're obsessed with the myth that visibility equals importance. But psychologically, what we actually crave is presence. We crave connection with people who are actually there, not performing for an invisible audience. When someone chooses not to broadcast something, when they keep something quiet, something internal, they're creating space for it to actually mean something. They're saying, through their silence, this matters too much to perform about. This is for me or for people I trust, not for public validation. And observant people recognize this. They see it as a sign of emotional maturity, of security, of someone who has actually thought about what's important. This is why observant people often become deeply interested in the people who aren't trying to be interesting. They're drawn to quiet people, interior people, people who have rich inner lives that they keep mostly private, because these people are actually readable in a different way. You can't read them from their performance, but you can read them from the quality of their presence, the depth in their eyes, the thoughtfulness of their words. Paradoxically, people who hide the most, in the sense of performing the least, are often the easiest for sensitive people to trust. Because what you see is what you get. There's no gap to analyze. There's no performance to decode. This creates an interesting psychological dynamic. The most perceptively sensitive people often end up in deep relationships with people who are naturally private and interior. It's a complementary pair. One person reads emotions and cues deeply. The other person has depths worth reading. And in these relationships, there's something rare, real connection. Not connection based on performance and validation. Connection based on actual seeing and being seen. Let's use a metaphor that might make this clearer. Think of every person as having two operating systems. The public operating system is what everyone sees. It's the interface. It's the "I'm fine." It's the curated photos. It's the professional voice. It's the social performance. Most of your interactions with most people happen at the level of this interface. But underneath that is the true operating system. It's the one that runs when nobody's watching. It's what you think about at 3 in the morning. It's what you feel when you're alone. It's your actual values, your actual fears, your actual desires, not the performed version you think is acceptable. Most people never interact at the level of the true operating system. They accept the interface as reality. But sensitive people are obsessed with accessing the true operating system. Not in a manipulative way, but in the way someone might be obsessed with understanding how something actually works, rather than just accepting it as a black box. And here's what's psychologically interesting. People feel seen when someone accesses their true operating system. That's what creates the sense of real connection. That's what makes someone feel like they finally matter. This is why people reveal themselves to the people who see through them. It's not because those people are pushy or manipulative. It's because, finally, there's someone who isn't requiring them to perform. Someone who is clearly interested in who they are, not what they do or how they appear. And being really seen, at the level of your true operating system, is something most of us are desperately hungry for. The performance-based life is exhausting. It's like running software constantly. Your true operating system wants to just exist. It wants to be allowed to be real. The reason hidden traits are so compelling to perceptive people is that they represent access to this true operating system. And access to truth is more valuable than any amount of curated performance could ever be. Let's state something that might sound obvious but that we often miss. Being real is the rarest thing in modern life. Think about how much of your day is spent in some form of performance. The professional voice at work, the cheerful tone when you're not feeling cheery, the "I'm doing great" when you're struggling, the laugh that signals "I get the joke" even when you didn't, the smile that says "I'm happy to see you" even when you're exhausted. This isn't malicious, it's protective, it's pragmatic, but it's also deeply, exhaustingly alienating. Most people are living in a state of near constant low-level performance anxiety. They're managing their image. They're monitoring how they're being perceived. They're adjusting their behavior based on feedback from the social environment. And this creates a vicious cycle. The more people perform, the more isolated they feel because they're not in connection with anyone. They're in a performance transaction with everyone. The more isolated they feel, the more anxious they become, which means the more carefully they curate their performance. It's exhausting, and it's widespread. So when someone encounters another person who is genuinely, consistently real, who isn't performing, who is just themselves, it feels shocking. It feels like a relief. It feels like finally someone has turned off the elevator music and just existed. This is what observant people are seeking. This is why they become obsessed with hidden things, because the hidden things are often the real things. The things that haven't been filtered through social performance. The things that are just true. And here's the psychological truth. People who can tolerate being really seen are more attractive, more trustworthy, and more connected than people who curate their presentation perfectly. Because people can sense the difference between performance and presence. And presence is what we're all actually hungry for. So to bring this all together, the reason people only see what you hide isn't because they're paranoid or invasive. It's because they're paying attention to the only real information in the room, the gap between the performance and the person. And if you're someone who feels like you're constantly being seen through, the solution isn't to perform better. It's to become more genuine. It's to let the person behind the mask step forward a little more. Because the most interesting, attractive, powerful version of you isn't the performed version. It's the real one. And the people who see you, who can read between the lines, who sense your true operating system, they already know this. They're waiting for you to catch up. If you enjoyed this exploration of how perception, authenticity, and connection actually work, please subscribe to Wired Logic HQ for more deep dives into the hidden mechanics of human behavior. What did you think? Do you resonate with being someone who sees through masks? Or do you feel like you're constantly being read by others? Let me know in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.